When application completion rates drop, something is off. Students aren't getting the support they need, and that's affecting your numbers. Enter Element 451's AI assistants. They step in where students struggle, offering real-time answers and advice, guiding them through every step. Learn how AI assistants can boost your enrollment outcomes. Visit element451.com/AI team to learn more.
Welcome to The Application, a podcast focused on actionable takeaways to help you level up your marketing and enrollment management game. I'm your host, Dr. Allison Tercio, Assistant Vice President of Enrollment and Marketing at Siena College. Join me every Tuesday for discussions with some of the best minds in higher ed marketing and enrollment management. The Application is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal faves linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Today, we're tackling one of the toughest questions in higher ed enrollment marketing. How do you hit ambitious short-term enrollment goals while still building toward a bigger strategic vision? And perhaps the bigger question, how do you do it without burning out? I'm thrilled to have Lauren Brooks here with us. She's a higher ed marketing strategist who spent over a decade helping institutions transform how they use CRMs, digital campaigns, and team alignment to meet goals in innovative ways. But beyond her impressive resume, Lauren has a journey that I think will resonate with so many. After years of implementing systems, building high-impact campaigns, and leading teams, Lauren took a step back to focus on her own mental health, a reminder we all could use from time to time. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Before we jump into enrollment strategy and protecting our mental health, I wanted to start with something fun because we're going to get deep today, but let's kick it off with something fun and a little bit more lighthearted. I hear you're a huge fan of true crime documentaries and women's sports. So I want to know, what's your go-to true crime series right now, and which team are you cheering on this season?
Yeah, I am. I really enjoy the storytelling aspect of true crime documentaries and less about the crimes that actually happen. I feel like I had to have a little come to Jesus moment around that, but I really got hooked around the Serial podcast that came out in 2014. Just listening to like all of the podcasts. Over the pandemic, I really got into Dateline. Like I would always watch it on TV, but I didn't realize that they had podcast version. And so I just binge listened to all of them. So that's always a go-to for me. Netflix has some really great documentary series, but I've kind of taken a little bit of a step back and focused a little bit more of my time into women's sports because not only are they having a moment, but a lot of cool things have been happening since it's playoff season. So for the National Women's Soccer League, the NWSL, I'm a big Bay FC fan. It's our expansion team that just happened in the Bay. This was their first season. They actually made it to the playoffs, which is really exciting. Though they did lose yesterday to the Washington Spirit, it was really exciting to go to some of their games and whatnot. And then for the WNBA, I've been a Phoenix Mercury fan for a while since my parents live in Arizona. Then I got to go to a number of games, including one of the WNBA finals, which is really, really cool to see.
That is really, really cool.
Yes. But I, unfortunately, after the season, having to break up with them because the Bay announced that they are having their own expansion team for the WNBA. So I will now be, well, I guess am as well, a Golden State Valkyrie fan.
Valkyrie, that's cool.
Yeah. So it's been really cool to see just the moment that women's sports is having. And I think even including the conversation around mental health and just advocating for a space for women to feel really supported and included. I have been a sports fan my entire life, grew up playing sports and going to sports, but they were mostly men's sports. And so to be actually in the women's sports like arenas and whatnot, it feels so welcoming, so inviting, so safe. And so I'm just like, well, I'm going to spend all of my money and time going and putting my time and energy into these things because I really believe in it. And it's a lot of fun too.
That does sound like a lot of fun. I loved the Olympics this summer because there were so many great women's athlete stories. And for my daughter, of course, but honestly, more importantly for my son.
Yes.
Right? So it's so fun. And when you can get your family around it, and I love that you're putting your time where it matters into what you believe in. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm really grateful to finally live in a place that has professional women's sports. So taking advantage of those moments and bringing friends along too of I know you're not typically a soccer fan, but we're going to go to a soccer game and just getting bandwagon, fans. And so it's been really fun.
Because it's an experience and everyone's going to enjoy themselves. So speaking of teams, there's our fun segue.
Yes.
You've led teams through implementation of CRM, new digital campaigns. And so you've seen firsthand the challenges that we experience in this industry and in particular enrollment marketing, that balance between short-term and long-term goals. So to start us off on that, could you talk a little bit about how you approach balancing immediate enrollment needs with those broader strategic goals?
Yeah, I think it's important when trying to find a balance between the long and short-term goals to establish what's the main thing. And being in higher ed, it's usually to enroll students. Yeah. So their experience is going to be the center focus of everything that we do. And everyone that's part of reaching those goals needs to be on the same page about what the main thing is. And after that, I like to look at what ideally we want to accomplish if everything goes right, because I love to be really optimistic about those sorts of things. And then to identify what's realistic. I think in my time working, it has been a really important factor to identify that at the start instead of while you're in the middle of it. There's always going to be time to adjust, but to be able to say, okay, this is ideally what we want, and then what realistically can we accomplish? I think the other part of trying to reach these goals, long and short term, is having consistent communication about what we're trying to accomplish and achieve, and also communicate realistically of what's on everyone's plate. The different teams that I've managed and also been a part of, everyone has things that are going on in their lives personally. And we like to think that we can have a work-life balance, but sometimes you can only bring 20% to that day because of something else that's going on. And so I like to be able to have those check-ins with my team and to just, it's not putting people's personal business out there, but just to be realistic about hey, this is what you're asking me to do. If I'm having a competing long-term goal that I need to also reach, here's what's not going to get done for the short term. And also having other managers and people that are more senior than me to be the ones advocating for that and communicating to the larger teams. I've been a part of mostly admissions and marketing teams, but having to work with faculty, with other staff members so that there is a complete understanding of not only what I'm doing and the transparency of what we're trying to accomplish and what we're doing, but that we're all on the same team and we're all trying to we're all trying to reach the same goals and how one another can help to accomplish those goals. So something that I've really enacted is that transparency part, especially because being in the enrollment marketing, a lot of what we do is not seen by other faculty, staff, and current students. Being able to present, hey, this is what our new ad campaign looks like. Here's what some of the email screenshots are going to look like so that they have an awareness if they do end up having a conversation with a prospective student, but also to show branding wise, how it affects that storytelling. And so I've seen that from start to finish work at an institution, and it took a long time to make that happen. And I'm seeing that now on the team that I'm at and working on is starting to do that. There's a lot of change that's happening at my current institution. And so we're kind of having to go back to the basics of here's our long-term goal, but we know that short-term, these things are also going to affect our long-term goals.
I think we're particularly vulnerable to this balance in the enrollment and marketing field in ways that other people on campus don't feel or recognize. So I think your communication piece is just so vital. And I love your outlook of we're going to build the most positive plan, the optimistic plan, and then the realistic one, because I think it's between those two things that burnout often happens, which we're going to talk about for sure in a little bit. But I think one of the other things that's so hard in this is like just staying grounded in those long-term objectives while dealing with that day-to-day, the urgent things that are popping up. What advice do you have around that?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest things is acknowledging the small victories. It's very hard sometimes when you're working with a very long-term goal that you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you just get, like you said, just caught in the day-to-day stuff. And so being able to acknowledge what you have accomplished and being able to honestly just start from writing things down. Like, this is what we are going to accomplish. So often I can sit in meetings and we can idealize all of these things that we want to do, but then to actually put the strategy in place and say, okay, now these are the tactics. This is exactly what we're going to do. And then being able to say, did we accomplish that? Yes or no? Did we do a good job with it? And being able to evaluate that. I think another thing that I've often had to hold myself to is not letting the small fixes become the norm. I think often we can get stuck in like trying to put fires out of the things that people are throwing at us. Often I have to take a step back and say, does this need my immediate attention right now? Or is this a consistent thing that is happening? Because if it's a consistent issue, especially like on the back end of the technical with implementing a CRM, then we need to go back to the drawing board and figure out, is this something that's been a roadblock and that we actually need to pull apart and rebuild? Or is there a better fix than this thing that continues?
System level fixes rather than one-off fixes. Yeah,
exactly. And I like to approach a lot of my work that way as well. I'm a just problem solver in that way. And so I think being able to look at things and knowing where you're headed, often we can be just in the dreaming stage of things. And sometimes you just got to make it happen and get something out there. And so the other thing for me that I kind of try to hold true is urgent does not mean that it has to be thrown together. I like to be able to take a beat to think about what we're trying to accomplish. It's not always sending a million emails to students. Maybe we can combine 4 or 5 emails into one and be more concise, and that our messaging can be more clear about what we're trying to have the prospective student do. They're getting a million communications from all of us. And so what are we doing besides having a consistent branding message and whatnot to stand out amongst the crowd? A huge value at the institution that I'm at is also just the education piece. We want them to choose us, but at the end of the day, we also want to help them on their college search journey. And so being able to hold true to those values, everything that we're putting out, again, centers around the student. And so I think being able to have those steps really can keep my feet on the ground and not living in the clouds, because often I like to do that, to know, okay, this is what I need to accomplish today. And I know that this is going to affect things in 2 or 3 months. And yeah, being able to approach it in that way.
I'm so glad you're a true believer like me. Like, you just believe in this work and helping students, whether they end up at your school or not. I'm with you on that. Our job needs to be to make them fight. If they don't jive with our school and they come, that's not good for anybody. We want people going to college and graduating from college and going out into the workforce with that education. That's what's important. So I'm so happy to hear that. Can you give an example of when these approaches that you're talking about, which I love, that they've paid off? Can you think of an example of like, because it's hard to sit back and do that, right?
Yeah.
But it's worth it in the end. So can you share an example of when it's been worth it?
Yeah, honestly, in this role that I've been in for about 1.5 years now, I was brought in to not fix, but create new. It was a new role that they had just added into the department. And so the immediate act was to increase communication to our prospective students, promoting events, virtual workshops, and like I said, the usual education about the college admissions process. Yeah. And then the longer ask was to create a thoughtful, segmented communication stream for our inquiries. So I wanted to kind of sit back and think about what we're immediately sending out versus what in the long term they will get, and that it still needed to be consistent. So I had to quickly build something that would be effective to communicate to our prospective students, to show up to these things, while also building this like very much longer term using new language and building this thing out that had never existed before. And I always like to think of working smarter and not harder. So the things that I immediately wanted to get out, then using some of those content pieces in our longer term strategy for this bigger communication stream. I often had to be reminded by my own boss, like, I know that you want to get everything right the first time, but we just need to get this out, and it's okay if it's like C work and it's okay if it's D work. And I have to fight against that all the time because I'm like, I want A or B work, like, especially when it comes to communication, emails, ads, all those sorts of things. And so what I was able to kind of look at is with the immediate ask of this short-term goal of increasing this communication, we had great engagement with our prospective students. And so I was able to use that then in how I was building this new communication stream that was segmented for the types of students that we have, because we have various undergrad, we have transfer, we have grad, we have international students. And so being able to use those really specific pieces that they were engaging within the short-term goals of those communications and putting them into this much bigger. And also while doing that, being able to work on the back end to clean up our data and how we were getting that, because it's like we could put the best communication plan together, but if we're not capturing their data and we are not confident in the data that we're receiving, then this does us no good.
You can't do any of those segments that you just named if you don't know. Yeah.
Exactly. So all along that was also educating both teams that I was working with, not only giving them updates and showing them what I was doing, but how this works to affect what we're doing. It may not always be a direct, that short term, that immediate fix, but in the long term, these students are going to have consistent messaging about what is going on. And we want to ensure that a high school sophomore is not going to get the exact same communication as a high school junior. And that was something that had never happened before. So it was really cool to be able to do that and also help myself grow professionally in being able to, keep those values that we had and being able to reach those short-term goals while also working on these longer-term goals, because I think it's really important to build a foundation. You need to have a solid foundation before you build the entire house. So as long as you have the blueprints of what you're doing, I think knowing that you're checking the boxes, you're doing the things, and knowing that one thing can affect the other.
It's so funny that this is the example you brought up, because I was doing this earlier today. I was working on communications flows for inquiries, the same exact thing. And when you first started to say that you were building it from scratch, I thought, oh, maybe they were outsourcing it before, because so many schools do. But wow, it really was, this was the first time there's been an intentional communications plan for prospective students, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was something that hadn't been done before in collaboration between the marketing and admissions department. There was communication that was going out, but it was kind of like all of the inquiries got kind of the same messaging.
Same thing, yeah.
Exactly. And so that was something that I was like, it's really important. And that was an ask of me. And so being able to work with the teams in creating the content, or at least the big pieces, the messages that we wanted to get to a high school sophomore versus a high school senior versus a transfer student. And then being able to also then match, I know this isn't revolutionary, but also working at small private schools, you kind of are doing revolutionary things. Then having all of our ad campaigns then to be in conjunction with what we're sending on the email side.
The basics matter.
Exactly.
The foundational things matter. Like you said, you could have the most perfectly written communication, email, text message, you're hitting all the value points. But if you don't have those things, none of it matters. I want to get to another balancing act, the one between brand and enrollment marketing strategies. But first, if you're listening, I'm absolutely positive, because I feel this way. Lauren's got your mind bubbling with ideas right now. For me, especially as a team leader, I've got so many thoughts going through my head. But take a quick pause and please rate or review this podcast. It's the best way to gain visibility of these great ideas across our industry. And thank you for your support. So back to the convo, part of what drives these competing priorities that we're experiencing and we've been discussing is that need to tell a consistent brand story, the institution's story, while meeting enrollment targets and staying focused on the student, right? So what's your best advice for getting those things in alignment?
It will take time. I think
that's a hard one. That's a hard pill to swallow.
It really is. It really is. And, I've been at institutions where it was an easier pill to swallow than at others.
There was more flexibility.
Exactly. And I think, one of the biggest things that I have seen is that silos only hurt. The silos that are within your organization only hurt you. I've been fortunate, like I said earlier, to work at institutions that were smaller, private, and the relationship between admissions and marketing has always been pretty good. There's been a lot of work behind the scenes to make it what it is, but being able to focus on the student and their experience and being able to communicate that to the larger stakeholders and giving realistic goals of what you can accomplish, because from the top, we can be asked to hit X amount of, getting students enrolled, and then being able to be clear about how that actually can happen. Yeah. I think having a consistent brand story only helps enrollment. The more things that you can consistently say from the very first touch point a prospective student has with you, whether it's an ad or whether it's a face-to-face conversation that an admissions counselor has, or even with faculty, that is going to be the thing that sticks with that student. And so when I think about how these things compete against one another, I think it speaks to a larger conversation of the relationships within the organization. And a lot of that is based on trust. I've been at a lot of institutions where enrollment just isn't where it needs to be. And it's very easy for fingers to be pointed and, blame to be thrown at one another. And that does nothing but hurt then the student's experience, because you are no longer centering what their experience is. And it's hard to not take things personally. I'm one that takes things personally a lot.
Oh my gosh. It's definitely one of my biggest weaknesses.
Yes. And so then having to step back and say, how can I, because I'm curious and I want to help the institution, how can I be of help? But I also know that I cannot do everything. I would like to. I'm a firstborn daughter. I can do everything, but I also know that I just physically and mentally can't. So being intentional with the plans that we have in place, as well as we communicate that, being able to let faculty and staff know what their part is too, and how those relationships can be mutually beneficial. Again, when we're all on the same page and we all know, it's easy to say like, oh yeah, we all want students here. But the work that it takes to get a student to your institution is a lot. And it's not just for the admission counselors to do.
Yeah, and that consistency that you're talking about can't happen without that piece, right? Everyone has to be telling the same story and be on the same page, rallying around the same goals so that you can have that consistency, which gets you clarity. And a few episodes back, if anyone hasn't listened to this one, you can go back. There's an episode on this podcast with Grant DeRue, which is actually the results of a research study around brand clarity, and that clarity actually drives enrollment results. So we can all think about all the things you have to line up for that clarity to be achieved. Lauren, thank you so much for sharing all this wisdom. And before we wrap up, I want to talk about a topic I know you're really passionate about, mental health. You've spoken about the importance of advocating for mental health, especially for Black women in higher ed. Could you share a little bit more about what led you to prioritize this and what advice you'd give to someone who's facing burnout in our field? Because I know that there is at least one person listening to this podcast who is feeling that.
Of course, yeah. My journey, I think, started long before I even knew. And it really came to a head around summer of 2020. There was a lot of things that were happening in our world during that time that I think it was a year and then some that I think really put things in the forefront of my mind. And I no longer could ignore them. And as a Black woman, I was asked to do a lot of things. One of them at my last institution, which was predominantly white, was that I needed to help conversations around being a Black woman. I was one of the only Black people on the staff side of the institution. And I knew that it was important, but I also very verbally said, you realize how unfair this is to put this work on me.
Yes.
And from that moment on, then I realized that I could no longer do all of this. I was giving so much to my church community, my friends, my work, which working at especially a healthcare college during the pandemic was on another level, and dealing with family things as well. And I finally had to say, I have to cut this all off. Like, I don't know how to have balance. And I was privileged enough to be able to quit my job and move across the country to live with my parents for a while. I thought it was going to be a few months and then I would get into job searching. And 2 months after being done with my work, I fell into the deepest depression that I have ever experienced in my life. And it was to a point where even showering was too much. And I was finally able to acknowledge like something is not right and I need help. It's not just that all of this like work and now that I don't have this is not enough to keep me going. And that's where a lot of work through therapy realized I was working through high functioning depression. And that I could rebuild my life and put all of those things back, but I would just get back into the cycle of taking care of everyone and doing all of the things without having the resources or the wherewithal to focus on me and what I needed. So I really needed to take the time then to slowly build back my life and figure out what was working and what wasn't. And it took 18 months. And while I got through that, was also job searching, which is a job in and of itself. Yeah. And I am so grateful for the time that I was able to take off. I don't wish it on anyone. And also, again, want to acknowledge the privilege that I had to be able to do so. But it really helped me prioritize what was important in my life. My mom has Parkinson's disease and most recently diagnosed with multiple system atrophy. And so while I was living with her and my dad, I was able to just be here and help. And I'm so grateful to have had the time.
Where you needed to be. Yeah.
Exactly. To be able to do that. And as I was looking for new jobs, I had a very strong list of things that I will not do and things that I will do. And so that took a lot out of, narrowed down the jobs. I was a director before, and I was like, I do not have the emotional capacity right now to do that again. Eventually, I want to go back to that, but I knew that with all that was going on in my life, that I needed to slowly rebuild this and be able to figure out, how do I manage what balance actually looks like? Yeah. And all the while having so many supportive people. And so being able to work at the institution that I am now, I was able to have this, and I was very clear also while job searching, like, here's what I'm going through. Here's why I'm taking a mental health break. And here is the values. One of those things was it needing to be remote and being able to help caregive for my mom. And I know a lot of people would be like, don't put all of that on the table. But for me, that was something really important, to be like, this is what I'm for, and this is what I'm not going to be able to be really flexible with. And so the place that I ended up being at has been amazing in supporting and giving me the space, while also, like, I can hold them accountable, being like, you said that you would give me the space to be able to do this. And I can say to my boss, today is a really hard day. I can get these 3 things done. And that is all that my brain can do. And so I think that, it's starting to change, especially with my peers, of how we talk about these things. And I want to be Superwoman and be able to give 100% every single day to my work. But there also are other important things in my life. I love what I do, and I love being able to check a box or, reach a goal that we've set out, but I cannot make work my entire life. And so I think being able to have these conversations very vocally as well, the things that are going on locally in our states, as well as what is nationally and globally, how these things, even the things that are personally happening with you. Like, again, you don't have to put all your personal business out there, but I think being able to realistically talk about, like, Black women are tired, and to not have to rely on them, or just looking at who the people are that you rely on a lot. And are you giving them space? I think especially as a manager or as a supervisor, checking in with your people to know what's going on in their lives. Do they have capacity? Because we can have the best laid goals for the things that we need to do. But if you are burning your teams out and you are having high turnover, that does nothing to help reach those longer term goals. And you're setting a very dangerous precedence for then even the prospective students or even student ambassadors that may be working in your departments, or, other current students, of, I'll work myself to the bone to get this done. We're not trauma surgeons. Our work is important, but it is not in that emergent.
Not life or death.
Exactly. And so I think being able to have real conversations with people about the things that do affect you and knowing what those boundaries are. I'm so much of a team player, but I am happy to log out and be able to focus on some of my work, because there was a time where I could not sleep because I was thinking about all of the things that I didn't get done the day before. And then that's just more things that I have to do the next day. And that is not a way to live. And so I think the easiest and most simple advice is find a way to choose yourself. The institutions that we work for are very important. But again, at the end of the day, they are a business. And I can appreciate the organizations that I've been a part of. And I have known people who have, spent years and years and years, and they leave and are very quickly replaced. And so the work that we do is so important in being able to influence and give opportunity to prospective students in choosing a college or university that is the right fit for them. I think about my own experience in choosing the college that I did. But I also know that I'm going to be working for the rest of my life as a 30-something-year-old and trying to set up myself for success, so that I can have a healthy balance with work, that it's a paycheck that helps, pay for my bills, and the opportunity to come to Phoenix and take care of my mom and support my dad, while also feeling like I have capacity to think of new things and new ways in communicating, in marketing. Because if you are not taking care of yourselves, you can do the day to day and you can check the boxes. But if there is the ask to do things in a more strategic, in a more creative way, and you do not have the emotional, mental, spiritual, whatever capacity, then you are not really being of help to your team. And so that was something that I really had to look at of like, where I'm at now, like I think that I'm hindering my team. They're in a place where they need to grow. And I don't want to be part of that growth and having that hard conversation with myself. I'm incredibly grateful and am always willing to talk to people about this because it has been a life-changing experience for me. And without having to talk about all of the trauma, because there are things that come up that is like, okay, I need to take a break. And just being really real. And again, so grateful to have a boss that is understanding of that and is willing to listen and give me the space to give to myself so that I can give the best to her and to my team.
Well, I appreciate your sharing this so much and your vulnerability. I know that everyone listening appreciates it, and there's going to be people who benefit from hearing this story so much. And we've got to find ways to get you this story in front of more people because it's definitely something that we need to address. We can't get to these goals that we're talking about if we don't, right?
Right.
So for everyone who's listening, I hope you're leaving with some new ideas for balancing the short and the long-term goals, aligning your team's efforts with the brand, but also taking care of you. If you enjoyed this conversation, please rate and review the application wherever you listen to podcasts. And as always, join us next time for more strategies and stories from higher ed enrollment marketing pros. Thanks so much, Lauren.
Thank you.
The application is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed tech shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea, and they feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Day Kibbles, Jeremy Tiers, and so many other of your favorite higher ed leaders. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.